Hello, and welcome to our webinar series on the 8 professional competencies for preventing drug misuse among college students. I'm Rich Lucy, Senior Prevention Program Manager in the Drug Enforcement Administration's Community Outreach and Prevention Support section. DEA is pleased to be part of this project to highlight the skills necessary for coordinating comprehensive campus efforts to prevent drug use. While we have made significant progress with these issues over recent decades, much more remains to be done. The foundation for this webinar series is a publication prepared by Dr. David Anderson, Professor Emeritus of Education and Human Development at George Mason University. The document was produced with funding from the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center, which is funded by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. DEA is pleased to continue its partnership and collaboration with SAMHSA and its Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. Over the course of these 8 webinars, we take a deeper dive into each of the core competencies that are designed to promote enhanced professional skills and ultimately affect college students' decisions surrounding drugs and alcohol. This 4th episode focuses on needs assessment, evaluation, and research. This webinar explores, among other things, the use of quantitative and qualitative measures to help with programmatic accountability by monitoring outcomes and processes at broad and focused levels. It emphasizes reasonable and locally appropriate goals for your efforts, cultural humility, and focuses on improvement. Additionally, you will learn how needs assessment and evaluation activities provide opportunities for faculty and student engagement. Remember, a needs assessment will provide you with the necessary snapshot of which issues to prioritize and focus on. And also keep in mind that evaluation cannot be seen as an afterthought. Evaluations are most useful when they are planned at the same time as the prevention implementation itself, rather than after the fact. It's our hope you and your campus benefit from the information being shared in this webinar. We think you'll find many ways to put the insights and contents to good use. With that, it's my pleasure to turn over today's episode to our host, Dr. David Anderson.
Thank you, Rich, for that kind introduction, and thank you and all of your colleagues at the Drug Enforcement Administration for your great work with drug misuse prevention overall and for promoting this webinar series. You've highlighted, as you have with all of these 8 webinars, that drug and alcohol misuse prevention is vitally important, and we've made a lot of progress over recent decades. You've also highlighted that we have a long ways to go, and that's really the foundation for this webinar series and for this new resource, the guide to the 8 professional competencies for higher education substance abuse prevention. That's what this is all about. This particular session is on needs assessment, evaluation, and research. And in preparing this entire document, of which today's session is one of 8, I convened 5 experts from around the country who have a long and broad and deep experience with drug and alcohol misuse prevention on our college campuses. Our aim with this resource and the resources appended to it, which we'll highlight, is to help enhance the knowledge, skills, and the applications of this important work for our professionals on our campuses and their colleagues. All of this is available at no cost on your website at the DEA and at www.preventioncompetencies.org. So as I mentioned, we convened 5 experts. And for today's webinar on needs assessment, evaluation, and research, no one is better prepared, in my view, than Dr. Jim Lang, who serves as the coordinator of alcohol and other drug prevention initiatives at San Diego State University and director of the Higher Education Center for Alcohol and Drug Misuse Prevention and Recovery at The Ohio State University. 2 hats, 1 person. Dr. Lang, thank you for being here today.
Oh, happy to do it.
And we're happy to hear your expertise. Just as a little bit of a background, Jim, can you talk about your background in your two hats and any prior experiences you've had that link with this issue, needs assessment, evaluation, and research. I know you do a lot of writing. I know you do a lot of research, but help our viewers know some of what you've been doing over your many years in the field.
Oh, sure thing. So actually, in many ways, it was research that brought me into the field. I was at a research firm, Institute for Research and Evaluation, and we had projects that we were evaluating, and we were doing some basic research as well. And that started getting me down the path of researching young adult behavior,
Mhm.
and that, of course, led to working on a college campus and doing some research in that regard. And then had the unique opportunity at San Diego State of being the coordinator of alcohol and other drug initiatives, but also having the element of research as part of the job that I took here in San Diego. And so that put me on that sort of parallel path of working uh, and doing the prevention on a campus, and also continuing doing research.
And then also with your hat at the Ohio State University and the Higher Education Center, I presume that needs assessment, evaluation, and research are integral to a lot of that.
Well, it is. It certainly helps also to understand how to understand research that others are doing. So what
Mhm.
the point, one of our main mission as a center is to assure that campuses have available the evidence-based approaches for their professionals who are doing the prevention on their campus. And so that means if you're talking about evidence-based programs, you're talking about programs that have been researched, that they have been evaluated and found to be effective. And so it is absolutely a part of um, the work of the higher ed center is to understand the research and keep up with it.
So turning to this guide that we produced, and again, you were an integral part of that and the thinking over a year. When we developed it, we came up with 8 areas. And again, we're talking today about the needs assessment, evaluation, and research area. How does that contribute? I know you've just alluded to it, but how does that contribute to the overall aim of all of these working in tandem coming into this health enhancing environment? How does that fit together? And why is needs assessment and evaluation research important? Why don't we just get into program management? Let's just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, well, it really does cut across all of the other competencies, and they all are. I mean, that's what's
That's
great
fair.
about
Yeah, that's fair.
your visual there is that none are on their own. Certainly, if you're talking about prevention science as one of the competencies, well, prevention science will use research. It will use evaluation, right? So it's both the concept of how do you do the work, know that it's being effective, but without getting that feedback that you get from a needs assessment, or the evaluation, that research, that's all part of it. So these are really integral to each of the competencies, and vice versa. So so yeah, you will see overlapping concepts. You will see that when we talk about research, we talk about, well, what is the goal of the research? And so I think that should be top of mind, that there are various goals that people might have for doing evaluations, for doing research. Needs assessment is one of the ones that's more obvious. When you say needs assessment, people go, okay, well, this must be an assessment of what our needs are. And so understanding of what the problems are and what hasn't been addressed is kind of right in the name. But the evaluation and the research, that's all part of it as well. And so if you are um, going at it from a strategic plan perspective. You will build in data collection, you will build in research, you will build in a process in which you are evaluating your programs.
So just diving a little deeper on that, and then I want to jump into these different elements within this area. Talking about needs assessment, implicit in what you're saying is looking at that locally. I mean, we have national needs assessments, but does that apply to the small private school, in the Midwest? And how is that different from the East and the Northeast and so forth? I mean, can you talk a little bit about local needs assessment? Just
Well, absolutely. It's important for a number of reasons. One would be that it's a different environment across our nation. This is a big country, and that we have regions, we have different issues going on in different places. So understanding what's happening in your local environment is very important. But really, maybe step back a little bit. If you're going to do some research, or if you're going to do some measurement, there's different goals that you might have in the process of constructing that. And this is where it's helpful to understand that core competency around prevention science, because that can help inform the types of methods you would use. But it's also in this needs assessment, evaluation, and research, you can think about it slightly different. And let's say you could be doing data collection for research sake, right? To learn, answer hypotheses, test hypotheses, sorry. That's an important goal. Another could be accountability or benchmarking, understanding that there's a need to know what's going on your campus. Sometimes because people just want to know how does it compare with others, or just know if it exists, right? So that sort of accountability or that sort of benchmarking is another potential reason you would be collecting data, you would be doing the research. And another is improvement. Improvement is really for the professional on campus, their goal, right? They really want to see some change occur based on the programs and the offerings and what they're doing. So that's where you start getting into a different type of measurement and a different style of measurement. When you want to do something that is improvement goal, let's step back. If you want to do something for improvement, you will need to measure more often. Make sure you're measuring something that will conceivably change over the course of your effort. And that feedback system. So that's often where a strategic planning process is going to really lean on data so that they can identify the problem, identify solutions, do them, see what happens, and then repeat. So those types of goals for your assessment, for your research, and for your evaluation differ and will likely make you move in different directions on how you're going to collect the data, the type of data you're going to collect, because it's going to be used for different things.
right. Depends on what end you want. Like even on that accountability piece, sometimes the bosses want to know, is investing dollars in this issue the way you're doing it the right way to do it? I mean, is it a good investment? They want to see some results.
Yes, and
Good.
they don't always. They may phrase it like that, but that may not be their actual goal, or that approach may not be what will get them to that goal. So really, what you need to know is the impact of any given program, so that you can understand whether or not the cost of that program is worth the expected impact.
Right.
And that's actually one of the challenging aspects of working with your administration. And I've been under various administrations on our campus, so I can say some things that may not reflect our current administration. But it is the case that sometimes goals will be placed on efforts that are not evidence-based goals setting. So, for instance, you'll sometimes see a campus say, well, we would like to see a 10% reduction in something. Could be cannabis use. Where did 10% come from? Is that a realistic goal given the types of changes that you're expecting? Is it even possible, given the population that you are reaching, that you will find a campus-wide reduction at that magnitude? Those are all questions that you could have when you start seeing those sort of arbitrary goal setting. Instead, going with the needs assessment, understanding the variability that's in there, understanding the population that might be reached, and then understanding the impact of various parts of the system, you can set a more meaningful goal that is plausibly met with the effort that's been given. So it again feeds back into the strategic planning, but it is something that the professional should understand when they're looking at the measurement that's going on, that there may be some impulses amongst those in the community to use those numbers to create arbitrary goals. That's not really following the system. It's better to look for ways that you can start seeing improvement incrementally over time, and then you'll get a better sense of what is possible for the goals that might be set.
Yeah, very nice. And part of what that says is, sometimes we get these unrealistic goals, and I know this dovetails into a different topic of communication and advocacy, so that we who are the knowledgeable ones on drug and alcohol misuse prevention can help inform those expectations. Because I know of a campus, I know this is decades ago, that said, and we talked about the high risk, the binge, the 5 or more for males and 4 for females and so forth, where they said the only acceptable outcome is 0, when the nation was at 42% of traditional age college students. But that was the goal that they set. And that is true that they set that. And that was totally unreasonable and never achievable.
I mean, it's a wonderful sentiment. We want to see no harm, right?
Sure.
We want to get, now in terms of use, it isn't necessarily the case that we need to see 0 of various substances. Some, yes, some, it could be that it's fine. The issue is, what are the harms and what are we trying to prevent? And so, so that's the first step. It's like, it's great to have that kind of concept, but is that actually needed? Let alone, is it possible? Is it, or within the control? I mean, possible is certainly the case. With extreme measures, you can probably get to something like a 0. But with what is truly under your control, you need to understand what you can feasibly change. But it also is an orientation that isn't really conducive to that professional being successful. What if all you did was cut it in half? Did you fail? No. What if you did reduce it by 10%? Did you fail? No. It's an improvement. This mindset of solving the problem versus incremental and continuous improvement is really important, because especially on a college campus, as you know, and we all know, there's going to be another set coming in a few months, right? We're doing this in summer now, at least for my campus, and there will be a new set of freshmen coming in, and there's only so much contact we have with them until they're here. And so it is an ever renewing population, and it's an ever changing population. And so that concept that we will solve is unrealistic.
Yeah,
but what we can
yeah, go ahead.
But what we really can do is improve. So when you have that goal, that's a different type of data collection you'll be doing. You'll want to make sure you can demonstrate improvement, which probably means you're going to do measurement much more frequently, so that you can capture the effect of everything you're trying. And so that's, again, the professional needs to understand, why are you doing the research? What are those elements of the data collection going to be used for? And do they match those goals? Are you gathering the data you need to succeed in the goal of your effort?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a lot of what you're talking about for all of us is aspirational. When we prepare this document, we said, this is the ideal at this point in time. This is aspirational. So with, if I may, with that context, can we look specifically at this area that has 10 competencies within it? Now, Jim, I know that in the document itself, what we've written on the knowledge and the skills and all the applications takes up 3 pages. 3 pages. And you and I have in our offices volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes. Put a whole new wing on the house. No, so how can you make sense of this, or how can you help our viewers make sense of this? And then the side question is one of these or 2 or maybe 3 more important than the others, or something that really grabs at your heart and says, this is number 1 for me? I know that's unfair, because the answer is going to be all.
They're all important.
I get that. But is there something that jumps out, or something that say, I want to dive a little deeper on the such and such one?
Well, one of the things, I don't know if maybe I'm punting, maybe I'm diverting.
You can punt. You can punt. Punting's fine.
I'm gonna mention that there's different types of data, and that there's an element of that cultural humility that needs to be put in place in how we get our data, everything about it. So a lot of times when we're talking about needs assessment, we're talking about evaluation, we're talking about research, people think survey, boom, we're going to be answering a whole bunch of questions, we'll have percentages at the end of the day, and then we've checked that box. But once you start realizing that particular approach is going to yield a particular bias in your understanding, then you want to make sure that you've expanded the way you're gathering data, that you are making sure that it's inclusive, so that you can do the work for your entire campus. And I'll throw in sort of an example for not really a cultural competency or a cultural humility type of approach, but just the idea that sometimes it's really helpful to actually listen to students and talk to them, and don't forget that qualitative element of your needs assessment. So really early on here at San Diego State, we had a safe ride program. And impaired driving is one of the topics that's near and dear to my professional career, my heart. And so when I found out about it, learning about what's going on campus, and I met with some of the students, they said, yeah, we have it, but it's really not getting used. They were paying for a shuttle to the hospitality zone near our campus. And they could count, there were like 60 people had used it. We're a big campus, so 60 people is really not doing much. So I started having talks with students, like, why aren't you using it? What's going on? And then it turns out there were all these barriers. They were like, well, we can't bring guests on if they aren't students. Well, we have to be in certain areas. It takes an hour and a half to get picked up. All these, it's like, well, okay, wait, let's start solving these problems. Let's change the policy. Let's make it cab-based. This was before rideshare. Cab-based versus shuttle. We can get things quicker. We went from 60 to about 2,000 rides. I mean, it was just a matter of talking to students, learning about what the barriers were, what their experience was. And you could dramatically improve a program. So and that's the case as well when you're starting to talk about, well, how are we meeting the needs of all our students? Well, are you talking to all the students? It doesn't. You won't get the story of why there may be differences if you disaggregate the data and find disparities. If all you've done is disaggregate your data and find disparities, you will still need to talk to people and learn what the experiences are so that you can start creating meaningful programs.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. Another example I've thought of is, you get that survey data and then you do focus groups or discussion groups to interpret the data. It's like, why is it that dot, dot, dot? Why do we see an increase here, a decrease there? Why do we see some differences based on where someone's living or what year in school they are or major? Just help me understand why.
Yeah, I mean, it's the talking to students. It's also being inclusive with who your team is, who are going to be working with you. So as you're creating that strategic planning, you include people who will have access, who will have information, will have lived experiences, and will be better able to interpret the issues that are being raised than if you have just a singularity.
Right, right. Any other examples you can give?
Um, Let me think.
I remember one from a data collect. This was not needs assessment, but I remember incident reports on a campus of maybe 6,000. And looking at those, they had a half dozen alcohol incidences in a semester. Now, does that resonate for you? A half dozen?
Oh yeah, I mean it does.
Yeah. That's low to me.
Oh, it's low, but it resonates. I mean, that's the benchmarking thing. So just because it's lower than what you might have expected doesn't mean it can't be lower still. I mean, it's a matter of understanding that these are the numbers and these are the things, the challenges, and understanding well. And it could be, and that's actually a really good point of using different types of data that are not necessarily self-report.
Yeah.
So sometimes we call those indicator variables, like how many arrests, how many transports, how many like of you sort of data mining of what's going on. Could be how many DUIs near your campus or things like that. And all of those are really interesting, and they can help inform you on what's going on. But there's a very big caveat in this. Sometimes your improvements will increase some of these issues. So, for instance, if you're talking about medical transports,
Oh, you're right.
so that's a number that you should hopefully get down to zero, right? We should have no one needing to get rushed to the hospital because they drank too much or they used a drug that turned out to be including fentanyl or whatever it is. We would love for those medical emergencies not to happen, and so they don't go. But sometimes your numbers will go up because, for instance, you've um, started an amnesty policy on your campus. So now students are calling 911 when they see one of their friends in need. And that's great. And so you could actually see your indicator variable go up, even though what you're doing is you're saving more lives. And so
Right.
that's again, the professional needs to be able to articulate that because um, it has come to me in my role as the coordinator where people have come and said, "Hey, our transports have ballooned." Like, yes, we've trained our RAs to call 911 now. We've talked to the fraternities. We wanted to see more transports. We don't want, of course, more medical emergencies. We want appropriate responses to the medical emergency, and it will be now. Right now, that was so 10 years ago talking about alcohol medical emergencies. Now we're talking about fentanyl overdoses.
Yeah.
And we will hopefully see more medical transports and not more deaths because people are administering Narcan on their campuses, or they are, the friends have it available. to help.
Awareness is higher. Awareness is higher.
Awareness, and then calling 911 and getting that person the appropriate medical care they need. So we will probably see more, even as the problem gets less, of those sorts of indicator variables. Same is true with enforcement. So sometimes your effort is to increase enforcement. So that's a preventive goal, is to heighten the perceived risk of getting in trouble. And sure enough, you'll probably have more citations, arrests, or whatever it is that you've increased patrols. That doesn't mean the problem got worse. That means that it worked to start developing that understanding amongst the community that there will be enforcement, and the problem could be going down just as your arrests are going up. So I've used kind of the sort of extreme component of, well, if you're really worried about how many arrests there are, just stop enforcement. We will solve the problem if that's how you're defining the problem. But that's not how we're defining the problem. So the campus professional, again, that advocacy is important, because the professional will be in groups and will be talking with administration who see the issue from some of these data and need to be guided into, well, our response may actually increase this as we decrease the problem.
Yeah, those are important contextual things for our professionals to remember. When I think about one of the primary audiences of this resource, the entire resource, is the prevention professional on the campus. And all too often, from my experience, and you can confirm or not confirm, is when they get faced with evaluation or needs assessment or research, they freeze, or they get scared, or they go, that's outside of my skill set. I can convene groups, I can facilitate discussions, I can educate, I can do campaigns, I can do peer education, but evaluation, can't do that. So can you take some of the sting? I mean, some of your examples are helping them, I hope helping our viewers think a little differently, but any other tips that help take the sting off of their, take the burden off of their shoulders? Or do they just need to read all those books?
No, I mean, this is competencies, right? So yes, do read some books, right? This is a professional who should understand some of the basics around evaluation research and needs assessment. But there are some resources they can go to. So another group is the Action Network for Equitable Wellbeing, and that's an acronym ANEW, and you can find that at anew.nyu.edu. That is a set that really, an organization that really is trying to build a network. So you're not alone as a professional. Similarly, the Higher Ed Center tries to make sure campus professionals not feel alone in this. They can start building some skills. We have webinars around evaluation and about research all the time. Either of those are resources they can turn to if they're starting to feel a little queasy. The other is just keep in mind this concept of improvement. If instead of solving, so you said, well, sometimes people get a little anxious when you talk about data. That's true, but there's the other side too. Some people will come to you and say, I love data. I'm a data person. Just give me some data. It's like, well, great, but what are you using it for? Sometimes you can get really caught up in this huge set of data, and you get this paralysis of analysis. That's an old term, but where you're just like, well, we got to understand it all the way before we start anything, and then a year has gone by, a year and a half, and then you're gonna, you finally get your baseline and you finally do some. I mean, no, start thinking about, well, what can we improve now, and how do we know if we improved it? If you can answer those questions, you probably will gather a little data and you'll do something and you might improve something. And if you don't improve it, you'll learn something that you can then say, well, maybe we'll try it a different way. Maybe we'll start talking
Excellent.
to students on why it didn't work. So it
Excellent.
can be really local, and it can be really um, kind of organic. If you start thinking about data collection, needs assessment, research, this is about how do you know if you did anything? And don't think of it as I've got to understand all of the variables all at once before we can do anything, because you can do a lot with actually of just a few items in a survey or something like that.
Yeah, that's great. I remember a study a decade ago, and it did not have closed questions or multiple choice. It was an open-ended question. And the questions were, what message do you hear from your peers about blank? Or what message do you hear from your parent? So it was open-ended. Coding was a challenge. I mean, it was a big job, but the question was open-ended. And so just what you're saying here, thinking about improvement, what can you improve now? Little questions here and there, whether it's with the residential staff or student security or police or faculty, just little questions, just with a group of a half dozen at a time, little improvements.
Yeah, it's little improvements. It's also building a network of people who you can ask to make some changes. So if you're talking about, for instance, RAs, they have a huge impact on really every aspect of the college experience. Really, they're the
Yeah.
ones who see the students the most, and they actually understand both sides of things because they are both a student and administration. And I was working with some students who were RAs who wanted to do a little study, and we found that we deployed a well-being measure called Wishes, um, just out on near dorms, just with a table and some candy bars and a QR code. They were able to gather data at
Mhm.
various locations, and that particular survey has a question about feeling of belonging.
Yeah.
And they were able to, just with a few, going out with so little resources, um, they were able to show that the students who were in our residence halls that were farther from our student union, so they're kind of difficult to
Oh,
get to, had a lower sense of belonging than
hmm,
those who were close.
hmm.
Um, so that's something actionable, right? So we
Yes,
can't move
absolutely.
the building, right? But we can be mindful of the fact that there's differences and making and intentional of activities and things to do for those who are feeling like they don't belong as much. And so that's something that, again, it doesn't have to be a huge effort. This was literally a table outside with candy bars and a QR code. We gathered enough data to find differences like that. So,
That's
um,
fascinating.
so
Yeah.
I just encourage. When you think about competencies, you might be thinking, "Oh my gosh, all the things I need to know." Know that sometimes just try some things that are simple too. And that's true of the needs assessment research and evaluation. You can do things in a relatively simple way to start figuring out where you are and where you can go.
Yeah, so just something you alluded to just in that is about some other allies or partners on campus. Any cautions about that? Um,
I mean,
or just thinking
this
about
is
engaging a faculty member, they know evaluation, or I mean, just or not.
I could give you experiences, but those would be one-offs, right? So I don't want to plant a seed that this will happen every time you go talk to a professor, or this, that's or that. I mean, it's going to be different, but know that each it's sort of what's in it for them type of thoughts. So what are their
Yeah.
worries? What do they see as what's at stake? If you were to start doing an evaluation that may have a reflection on a different department, you'd want to have them on board right away. And so that they understand that the reason you're learning, trying to learn something about this is not because you want to show that there are failures, it's so that everyone can work together to improve. So again, this is where I would sort of try to assure that the reason we're doing this is because every system can improve. It's not as though, and this is where benchmarking can kind of be a problem. So for instance, if you have mostly used your data to benchmark, where administrators are always like, well, how do we compare? How do we compare to this campus or that? Like, well, that's great. That's a number. The you're at 30%, the nation's at 35. Are you done because of that? I mean, is that the end? It's not really the end. It's like, okay, well, at least we're not horrible. But does that mean we can't improve even more? I
Right.
mean, we if you know about the research side of things, that sort of an analysis is not valid. It's giving like this campus to this campus. You know, there's a lot of variables that did not get controlled for, and so you comparing across like that is mostly meaningless, but at most, maybe it lets administrators sleep better, knowing that they're not worse than some other institution. That's not your goal as a professional. Your goal is to say, well, here we are. We're below the national average, but we're not at zero. We can still improve. And
And,
that is true of working with any of the partners that you have. It's like you may be doing a great job. Does that mean we can't improve? Of course we can. We just need to figure out where the improvement can happen and see if it does when we try things that will improve the system.
yeah, that's the monitoring. Yeah, just one other thing, just highlight it when we did the resource, we came up with some resources for each of the competency areas, and you know, viewers of this can go to any of those resources and learn more. You gave us two great resources. Let's look at one other question. And, well, there's going to be different kinds of audiences looking at this. There may be administrators, policymakers, there may be law enforcement, health center folks, people in fraternity, sorority life, athletics, first year experience. Any special message that may stand out a little different for any of those groups?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things, if I'm talking to the partners and not necessarily preventionists, is understand that preventionists, if they are following this sort of model of competency, will ask for data, will ask for a needs assessment, will ask for a strategic plan that's based on that sort of research, and so not to fear it, right? So this element of um, if we don't measure it, we don't have to deal with it, or we don't want to know. That sometimes permeates. It's like, well, we're I think we're pretty good. We can just go on to the next thing. Like, no, there's a professional on campus who really needs to be working on this, and they will need your help, and they will need to be gathering data and to be using the tools that a preventionist uses to effectively improve the well-being ultimately, but the AOD issues specifically on their campus.
Okay. Anything else for any other audiences? Anyone you want to pull, any group you want to pull out? Or no?
Well, if there's some faculty out there, and you
Good.
mentioned them,
Okay.
so I'll go ahead and throw them out. Not throw
Good.
them out. I'll, I'll speak to them for a second. You have some really great knowledge and skills, and you also have a different timeline than the campus professional. So the faculty out there, and this is something that can be frustrating for the professional. It's like, hey, we've got these experts on our campus. They teach a class on this, and like, great. What's their timeline? Well, they want to write a grant. They want to win the grant. They want to start the grant. They may be talking about launching a program in 2 years. Um, you, as a professional, will need to be working along the way on other things. If that's what your goal is to have them help spearhead something. It's a different timeline for those who are in the academic side of the campus versus the student affairs or the student facing. We are working on weeks to weeks. We're working on understanding that there's a new set coming in every year. There's it's nonstop. It's 24 hours a day. It's 7 days a week around the entire year. That's not the timeline for everyone on campus. And so it's a challenge that both sides need to understand. If you want to be part of a strategic planning committee as a faculty offering this, understand that the goals of that committee probably mean having things in place in months, not years. And so there will be a difference of culture and timeline.
That's very helpful, and I can see that segment being pulled out, and provost using that. So thank you, Jim. Before we close, anything else you want to say about this competency area of needs assessment, evaluation, and research, or the entire set of competency areas, entire package of all 8 of these?
Well, of course, they're all very important, but you picked me for a reason to talk about this one, because I really do see it as integral to so many, if not literally all. It is your feedback system. It is your ability to see, to gauge your effects, to steer towards the right direction. And so ignoring that or not honoring the importance of it within all the others, within the motivation for any of the other actions, it is to see change. And the only change that matters is the change that you can see. And that sounds weird, but it's true. It's like that tree falling in the forest. If you weren't there, no one saw it, nothing, did it happen even? So we need to be able to document our changes. We want to see that our efforts are making the change that we want to see happen. These are the eyes and ears of all of the other components. So that's how I would leave it.
Yeah, and that's a nice summary. Change, again, going back to our model, towards that health enhancing environment, as the needs assessment helps to define, and your vision helps to define for that campus. Very nicely done. So again, thank you, Jim. Helpful insights, helpful comments. You've taken a lot of the sting out of this about evaluation. I really like the call out for faculty. And, as a former student affairs person and then faculty for more than those years, I can see both sides. So I think that's really important. The idea of change and the idea of and what can you improve now really brings to life this issue. And I think it makes it very understandable and very doable. It's very reasonable. So in closing, I want to thank the Mid-America PTTC for their initial funding for this and their continued support. I also thank Rich Lucy and his colleagues at the Drug Enforcement Administration for their support and their sponsorship of this webinar series, and for all of their larger good work. Now the responsibility is with the audience to carry this forward. Again, it's aspirational to help move forward the whole prevention competencies. And again, to your point, Jim, change and change that we can see. So thank you. I thank the audience. Thank you, Jim, for being here.
Happy to do it.